Welcome to Reality Coaching for Writers, the real stuff
No fluff.
and no fluff. And today on Reality Coaching for Writers, the question is, how do you know when the spirit is moving you to go someplace different? Diana, welcome back. You were gone last week.
I
I kind of
was.
put them on. So tell the listeners a little bit where you were.
Well, talk about moving on. I've moved to Wilmington, North Carolina, where I'm living on the coast and very, very close to the beach. And I definitely felt the Holy Spirit give me permission to follow my lifelong dream of living on the coast. Anywhere in the world, I was willing to go, but with my son staying in Asheville, North Carolina, it just made sense to come to Wilmington. But the other big draw for me, Eddie, was there's a church here that I love and already feel at home in. So that was a big thing for me. The church and the coast together, it's a win-win.
So you've been down there, what, a little over a week now? And
1 week today.
1 week, and you were telling me before we came on the show that you've already uh, found your way down to the city hall to pay for a parking ticket. Is that right?
I got my first parking ticket today, and it was crazy because I tried to pay. Normally, I go down to Fort Fisher Beach, which has free parking, beautiful beach area, not so crowded. But today I wanted to check out the beach very close to where I'm going to be renting, which is right at the start of Curry Beach, Carolina Beach, Curry Beach. I'm on the island, Carolina Beach Island. And so I just thought, okay, I'm going to pay today. I'm going to go real close to home because once I'm in my place, I just get my cup of coffee, walk over a dune, and I'm there. So I tried the kiosk, inserted my card, tried the QR code, nothing was working. And so I just walked up to stayed on the little wood pathway, looked at the ocean, was up there about 4 minutes, turned around and came back and had a parking ticket of $100. So I went, took me 15 minutes, going 25 miles an hour down the Strand to the parking office, office. So I have a foreman and she feels pretty good that she'll do everything she can, the secretary typing in my info, because she was even having trouble with the internet in the office.
Yeah.
So I have hope.
Isn't it wonderful that Jesus paid for all our sins and we don't have to go through that formality to get one sin taken care of,
Well, and that's interesting, Eddie, because how many people spend their lives not understanding that and jumping through hoops even after they put their faith and trust in Christ, thinking somehow they still have to earn his approval, somehow they still have to earn his love, when we couldn't, no matter how perfect we are, how wonderful we behave, we would be as lost as the worst person. So yes, I am grateful.
It would be kind of frustrating to go to all the trouble that you went to today to go down and do all that, and then you get there and they go, "It's already been taken care of." I mean, your dad paid for that as soon as it happened. You wasted half an hour to an hour driving now. Go home and be careful. Just be careful the rest of the day.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to, and yeah. But we were talking about the Holy Spirit moving us on. Eddie, how about in your writing? Has that played a part?
Well, it hasn't in the writing. It hasn't been so much, but there was things that happened this weekend going to the Maranatha conference that confirmed what I suspected Jesus has been asking me to do for a while. And what I'm getting ready to say may get some people, it may get them a little bit fired up, but on the way up there, when I got to Chicago, I was sitting in the airport and I had one vacant seat beside me. Okay, so I had spaced out enough room on either side, like I'm not going to get bothered. And a guy came by later and sat down beside me, and a friend of his girl showed up, and they apparently hadn't seen each other for a while. They started talking, but as soon as I was sitting there, I kind of realized pretty quickly the guy's probably gay. I mean, just the way he dresses, the way he speaks, he's in theater, some of the things he's talking about. which is fine. I mean, but I just happen to notice, he's probably gay.
Hmm.
So that's fine. So I get on the plane. We fly to Grand Rapids, and we get off, and I meet Athena Dean is riding with me to the Maranatha conference. So we get in the lift. Our driver's Jamie, and Jamie gets out of the car, and she looks kind of like a guy, and I'm like, that's not a coincidence. That's just kind of weird, right? So could be the area I'm in, maybe. So I go to the conference. Coming back from Grand Rapids to Chicago, another guy sits beside me at the back of the plane, right? Um, and he's gay. I mean, it's clear he's gay because he looks like Elton John, has the same Elton John shoes and all this other stuff. And then flying from Chicago to Raleigh, there's a Southwest new guy. He hadn't even been to work for Southwest in the air for a week. He's been going through training. I'm not even sure he's actually had a flight yet. He was coming back to Raleigh, but he's a Southwest employee and he's gay. And so at the end of all this, I'm thinking, well, apparently Jesus trusts me enough to place these individuals beside me because he knows I'm not going to hurt them. I'm not going to say something that's going to wound them, that's not going to drive them away from his love.
Yeah.
And Diana, it was a humbling experience to know that he entrusts me enough to be kind and compassionate to people who I don't have any grievance towards them anyway, but we talk about mission fields sometimes.
Yeah.
And a lot of times just, if Jesus keeps bringing the same sort of individual to you over and over again, that may be his way of saying, I trust you with this. Now don't screw it up.
Yeah.
Don't dishonor my name.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what he was doing this past week. It wasn't so much writing, it was more working on me to be more looking outward and be more kind and compassionate.
Well, Eddie, how about in your homeless ministry? Do you run across people in that community and interact with them there?
Oh yeah. There was early in the process. There was an individual who asked for a bra, size 34. I don't know the measurements. She gave me the measurements, and but it was a guy, and he calls himself Samantha, but it was a guy, and I was like, I mean, it ain't no big deal for me to get a bra. I mean, at the Goodwill store, if that's what she wants. So I get jelly beans, and why not a bra? It's not my place to go and comment on the guy's clothing attire. I'm not going to do that. Clearly, if you've seen me dress, I have no style conscience anyway. So who am I to speak about that?
Now, and so having this repetitive experience, maybe God's preparing you because you're going to have a greater ministry amongst these people.
Well, I would hope so, because we're talking about writing, and oftentimes the writing comes after the experience, and so that's kind of the good lead in to it, because once you've had the experience enough and you've become comfortable with it enough, then the writing opportunity comes. And the Lord knows we need well communicated messages to the LGBT community to go, hey, Jesus ain't the problem.
Right.
He's the solution. I am firmly convinced, and I think my spirit will eventually confirm this, that the majority of people in the LGBT community are there because they do not feel they're loved. They have been wounded at home. Their preference for who they want to be with may have been something way back, but when they come to their parents or whatever, or their family members, their church, they just feel like they're cast out, that they're not loved.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure within the lesbian community, a lot of women, it's not so much the sexuality part of it, it's just the comfort and the safety of being with another female, because you're not going to get beat up. You're not going to get hit in the face and all the other stuff. So I can be here and I'm safe. And I may be wrong about that, but I just suspect that's part of it.
I think that's definitely stories that I've gotten when I've asked and developed friendships with people. I love getting the stories because they're varied. I used to put it all in one category, and I've learned it doesn't all fit under one category,
Right.
but it is what we're all looking for, love and connection. We're all looking, that's how God designed us, to look for love and connection, community, church family. And remember that old song, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we do it as heterosexuals. And so now in a world where there aren't any absolutes, it's not unusual then to see that people are really casting further about looking for that love and connection,
Yeah.
And I think I love that the word that came to you from Holy Spirit was trust. I trust you with these people, to love them and just be regular with them, instead of just shock and whatever. And I think that's it. I think if we can show up and be love, it'll make a big difference in everybody's confusing lives.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons that people could the monks or whatever could abstain from marriage or whatever is if you love Jesus more than you love anything or anybody else, if you love him more, then it's really easy to basically almost live as a single individual and be perfectly content. And I know a lot of people hear that and go, that there's no way. But I believe that is true. I believe that is absolutely true. When you fall in love with the one person who completely fulfills you, then there really isn't a reason for it to have anybody else. You may have other people in your lives, but you don't absolutely have to have them to be complete. And that is what Jesus brings to us, is eventually we get around to realizing he's all we need. I know you and I have talked about this before. You're always looking for one more guy in your life to, and
I quit looking a good while ago.
Right.
But I mean, I don't like living life alone, but I have found that contentment, and my church family is important, which is why I looked for the church, then the coast, that was close to the church, because for me, that's my covering. That's where I find my family, and where I'm happy, and so, I joke about it, but I think, I think I'm really happy where I am, because boy, I like simplicity in my life. I don't like complications.
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing on the writing side. I'm beginning to document some of these things because I don't want to forget them. At my age, I'll forget if I don't. But I don't want to forget them because there probably is, if not a book, there's certainly, other blog writing or something else that goes with it. There's writings that'll come out of this, I think, that'll be important. I just don't think Jesus uses, he may not use all of it right away, but he doesn't waste anything. Whatever the scraps are, he'll pick those up and find a way to use those. So I'm trying to be obedient and observant at the same time.
Well, I love that you're recording it. And, I think many writers have learned to have a pad and pen in the car when they're traveling. I've learned that I can hit record on my phone in my notes if I get to my notes section and just record something into my notes. But because you don't want to forget those little snatches of character development that come to you or something. But I do the same thing. I write things down and I don't lose them. And then when I go home, I try to put them in files that are clearly labeled so that I can go back to them when I am, I have an article that's going to be due for a writing magazine, and I want to be able to find those tidbits of little things that have come to me. So I am pretty fastidious about labeling my files and my Word documents and keeping them organized. It's always been hard whenever you work with a writer that has chapter 3 in this file and chapter 5 over here, and they aren't working off of a single document. That's one of the first things I say is get it all in a single document, so that you can then have a master document that you're working from, but make sure you label,
Yeah. So one of the keynote at the Maranatha conference was Charles Martin. And I don't know if you've ever heard Charles Martin speak. It was the first time I've ever heard him speak.
I haven't heard him speak.
he did a really great presentation. He was reading, normally a speaker speaks, right? They memorize the topic and they speak, and he probably could have done that. But he was reading from a book he's working on, or maybe he's already, I think he said he was working on this book, and it was a compilation of some of the from other books he's written. But one of the takeaways in one of the stories he was telling was about the movie A Mountain Between Us.
Mm.
There was a novel, and I may have just butchered the title of the movie and the book, but it was a movie that was made from one of his novels, right? And this was recently, and it was made out of Hollywood. And again, I may not have his recount exactly correct, but for the most part, he sold the rights, or the publisher sold the rights to to have it made into a movie. And at that point, they lost all control over the content of the movie, right? That's what happens. And so he and Christy had been on the set. They, got to do all the fun and games kind of stuff. And then it was the time for the premiere. And so Charles and Christy and the boys were going to the movie up in New York to see it. And I think this is right. He's like, while we're going in the theater, while we're there, his phone's blowing up, because this is like the night of the premiere, right? His phone's blowing up, getting text messages, and it just keeps on and on. He finally has to shut it off. And well, it turns out, I guess there's a sex scene in the movie. And so a lot of his readers are going, how dare you? We thought you were a Christian, right? And they just skewer him, right? And of course he was trying to explain, I didn't have anything to do with it. I didn't know anything about it, but you should have, but you should have known, da da da. Anyway, so I walked out of his talk, and I was thinking, yeah, that is so much the way the church still is today, that we all have our perception of absolutely what everybody should do, including this person over there, and we don't have all the information.
Right.
And rather than ask or wait or trust that if somebody says they're a Christian, they are, and maybe they know more about the situation than we do, and maybe they didn't have control. Rather than do that, we just judge them, and just burn them down. And anyway, I came out of there thinking that was kind of my experience in the publishing industry. It's still my experience with book reviewers. It's one of those things where I'm all talking to authors all the time. Be very careful what you write and who you pitch the book to, because if the wrong Christian market reader gets to it, they're going to give you 1-star reviews because they don't agree with your theology or whatever. Anyway, that was one of the takeaways from his talk, which kind of spoke to me.
Well, and Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers was turned into a movie, and she received a ton of backlash saying, how can you call that a Christian movie? And she said, it's not a Christian movie.
Right.
She said, it's not. She said, it has a theme of Christian, there's the main character is a strong Christian, but it's about a real, Hosea, the story of Hosea, who's called to marry a prostitute. I remember when I was in Bible college, all of us were like, oh God, please don't let it call us to run naked through the streets, or please don't call us to marry a prostitute or a pimp or whatever, because God did outrageous things in the Word. And but Redeeming Love is all about redeeming love and how unconditional love. The story is beautiful, but it has some sexy scenes in it, but I can see how God will use that to stir up the heart and awaken a hunger for God in people that don't know the Lord.
Yeah, that's kind of what Charles said at the conclusion. He said, as difficult as it was to kind of go through that with my kids and my family, and sitting right there, and we had to take the contact button off the website that night, and
oh wow.
As difficult as it was, he said, it gave me just a small glimpse of how Jesus must have felt when he was falsely accused. Of course, and Jesus didn't say anything back, even though he knew he wasn't guilty. He just kept his mouth shut and just absorbed it, just took it in, because he knew if he said anything, it was going to be confrontational. So his response was, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And we read that verse, and too often we think, yeah, I hear that. but really, I think it was a sincere prayer. He's like, they just don't understand. So
Yeah.
please forgive them. So maybe that's what we ought to be adding to the end of all of our books. And this is for the listeners. When you write something, at the end you go, and if you don't like it and I offended you, I ask now for your forgiveness. Please forgive me.
We'll call it the forgiveness clause.
Yeah, the forgiveness clause.
Add the forgiveness clause. Well, I just think of that. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I don't know why believers expect non-believers to behave like believers. I mean, it's bad enough we have believers behaving badly, let alone expecting the world to understand what the Christian walk is. Whenever God gives us as believers so many years to get it right, I mean, a lifetime to get it right. And we still will shed tears when we stand, in the place of a judgment, because we'll realize, oh my gosh, I really missed the mark. If it weren't for Christ, what hope would there be? What hope? Yeah. So, yeah, more grace, more love. What else did you pick up at the conference? What?
Well, I met another ghostwriter.
Good.
She works for a newspaper up in the Michigan area, and she's she that's her job. That's her day job as a journalist, but she's looking to get into more ghostwriting. So we talked about that and how public speakers oftentimes they've got the message, they just don't have the time to write, nor do they want to really learn how to write. They want to speak because that's what they're good at.
Right.
That's their gift. And we were talking about how that's a pretty good market because there are so many people now that are out speaking that weren't before, and all of them need a book. That's the bottom line. If you're a speaker, you need a book. You're missing revenue opportunity, and you're also missing marketing opportunities. And so we talked about that for a while. We talked a little bit about screenwriting, and we talked a lot about memoir writing.
Good.
Yeah, and in fact, I was on a call right before the Zoom thing this afternoon. I was on a call with a guy, and he wanted to write an autobiography. He's about 28. He's got a couple of day jobs, but he likes boxing. He's a boxer, right? And so he was going to the gym after the call to box and stuff, all this stuff. And he wanted to write an autobiography, and we were talking about what he has, and I was like, man, if you're in boxing, and it's a spirit, he's got a spiritual story to go with it. And I was explaining that an autobiography, if you've got a lot of life experiences and they're really good, I said it's like presenting a whole buffet of really great food, right, to readers. But the readers only have one plate. They can come back for seconds, but if they fill up the first plate and eat it all, and then they come back next time, it's maybe they only get a half a plate, and that's all they can eat. And there's all this great food still in the buffet that they never can get to because they're full. I said, that's the problem with writing an autobiography, is if you've got really good stuff, you've almost got too much for the reader. I said, it's better, especially in his case, because he's a boxer, I said, take the boxing thing and use one event from your life that really resonated with you and make that the catalyst for this little short story, make it a short book, write a short little boxing story. I said, and if that's well received by the readers, and it probably will be, then you write a second book with another event from your life. And I said, that's a better way to me to use autobiography work. And we talked about this at the conference, rather than dump it all in, break it up into small chunks.
Yeah.
That'll make you a better writer. It'll make the events seem more important than they were, because they're not just one thing on the buffet. It is the thing on the buffet.
I have to tell you, Eddie, when you said he's 28 years old and wants to write his life story, part of me is like, you haven't lived long enough to have that much to say. But I can see where boxing analogies would be a fun thing to go from. But it's kind of like when I went to a women's conference and they had a 19-year-old girl teach on Proverbs 31. I didn't take one note because it's like, honey, you haven't lived long enough to know anything about Proverbs 31. So
and he was asking for how, he said, just give me an example of how you would do this. I mean, how this, because, and that's what you and I do this as writers coaches. People ask, well, can you give me an example? Because if I'm getting an example, then their brain can begin to wrap it around it. And so, oh, I see where you're coming from. And I said, well, if you're a boxer, let's say that you're working with a mentor coach who's training you, and you've had some success with this guy. He's really good. He had won some titles in the past when he was coming up. He was never on TV, but within the boxing community, a lot of people knew this guy because he was really good. And he stepped out of the ring at the right time, right before he got his head bashed in and all this stuff. He was smart enough to know when to step out. And he's really good at what he's doing, but he's, maybe 50 years old. He's your mentor, and he's taking you to the next level. That's the beginning of Act One. That's what I told my guy. And I said, but now let's suppose that after your next fight and you won the match and you're back in the locker room, you're celebrating out, your mentor comes up and he says, this was the last bout I could coach for you. And I have to step aside. And you go, well, why? I mean, we're on the roll. And he goes, I got pancreatic cancer and I've got to go through, treatment and, who knows where I'm going to wind up a year from now. He said, but that's the fight I've got to fight right now, right? And I told him, I said, my author friend, I said, so now you've got two things going on here. I said, that character has a fight to fight. He's got a different journey, a different bout. I said, but now you've got to fight too without your mentor.
Right.
You got to keep going without the guy in your corner, right? I said, this is just a short way that you can take a life event and turn it into a story. It doesn't have to be long or involved, but it's going to resonate with the reader because they're going to see the emotional side of it and also the physical side of it, both.
Yeah.
And I said, that's what writers do. We take one event, we meditate on it, we let the Holy Spirit work within us, and then we come up with an idea and we run with it. And it impacts people. That's what we do.
I love it. That's good.
You got it. Well, we're running out of time quickly again, which is fine because in your case, unless you could still drive down to Fort Fisher and not get a parking ticket and still get back on the beach today.
I actually am working on submissions of a memoir today, so I'll actually stay at my desk. Tomorrow I'll start fresh and go straight to the free parking.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, Eddie, one tip that I'll leave you, that I love that analogy of the buffet though, with the full plate and what you got to watch out for. You give them good stuff right in the beginning. That explains why a lot of nonfiction books have a bookmark in them and they're never finished. People fill up on the first little bit. But this past week I did a particular coaching with a client and recommended a book that I just thought I'd throw out. It's called The Path. And it's by Laurie Beth Jones. And it's really great in how to come up with your mission statement and also with brands. Because, the thing, Eddie, you and I see is people pick too small of a brand and they don't plan for future growth as a writer. And then they find they're stuck in this small little, vision of who they are and they can't bust out of it. It's kind of like a actor gets stuck in playing, just blonde bimbos, but they want to do a really good part, but they're cast into that. So with a brand, it's really good to know your mission statement and then also just really see all the different parts that fall under that. And then that's where you want to cast your brand big enough to grow into all those things. So it's a great book. So that's my tip that I'm wanting to leave our listeners with today.
Can I use an example? Give an example?
Yeah,
It was actually an example I used on the call. I was trying to explain to the author about Amazon and Kindle Direct Publishing because that was one of the things he was interested in and how that works. And I was trying to explain it to him, and I said, he said, but I want to do a print book. And I go, okay, let me stop right there and just say that it's Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing. I said, but it's not just Kindle, it's also paper and hardback. And he said, really? I go, yeah. So there's a brand issue that Amazon screwed up, right?
Right.
They they botched this because if back in whenever they started, they knew they were getting into the publishing business. They knew that. They had Create Space. They were
Right.
in the publishing of print books.
Right.
Somebody on Amazon should have said, whoa, 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 don't label it to Kindle. It's Amazon Publishing,
Yeah.
period. You
Yeah.
know, if they'd have, then that would have encompassed movies, everything, you know, podcasts, the whole line. But you're right. Too often we have the narrow view of what we can do, and then God has the bigger view. So you really don't
Exactly.
know. You
Yeah.
don't know. All
Yeah.
right.
He
Well,
always
well, do
wants
me,
more for us. Yeah.
all right. So here's my challenge to you. Please, when you see the swells coming up, keep doing what you did last week. Go down there and take a picture of some of the waves rolling in so that even if I can't get down there, because I busted my board. I've got a
Oh
ding in.
no.
Yeah, maybe I'll show it next week, but I got a ding in my board, a couple of dings actually, and I've ordered something called board bandages. So I'll put them on my board. Maybe next week I'll put a picture up of my surfboard with his band-aids on it, but they're not bad. But anyway, yeah. So keep taking pictures of the waves rolling in because I can hop in the car and drive down there, and maybe one week we'll do this together down at
Yeah.
Turkey.
And your sister's just up the road.
Well, my cousins are
Your
all my cousins. Yeah, all my
Okay.
cousins. Yeah, my
Yeah.
cousins are 30 minutes from where you are. So if you ever need anything, just shout.
Okay.
All right. Well, listen, next week we're gonna get serious about talking about writing next week. We're gonna have some real meat next week on something that you haven't heard from us before. And so check with us next week. Diana, have a great week
Have a
and
great week.
see you then.